Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our, well, for a lot of you, it's the second day of the Food and Agriculture Co-ops Conference, and welcome to those of you who are here for the data symposium as well. We warmed everything up for you yesterday. We worked out any kinks and, well, there weren't really any kinks, so everything is running smoothly, and we're excited to get going for their second day here. So there are just a few things to go over, like as far as the logistics of the day, because we have two parallel events now. All of our gatherings, like breakfast and lunch, and so on, are here in this room, and then the symposium folks will be going elsewhere for their sessions, and Paul is going to cover that in a moment. And likewise, if you're joining us online today, if you're a part of the symposium, you'll have to change the link to a different Zoom session for your sessions. So just we're going to try to go through the announcements here early so that we can, everyone has time to be where they need to be and sessions can start on time there. I just want to, again, today, acknowledge that we are gathering on Secwepemc territory. The Tk'emlúps te Secwepemc First Nation has lived here for millennia, and we acknowledge that we're on their land and that we're grateful for the opportunity to gather here. We're going to have opportunity today for more discussion about what that actually means, and being on agricultural producers and agricultural sector operates on land that was taken from others, and what reconciliation means. And that is an important part of when we were putting this conference together, discussing how do we bring this into our conversation so that it's not a side note, but it becomes a primary focus of how we understand collaboration and work together, that it's not simply something that is given lip service, but that is something that becomes how we understand our task as we work forward. I want to thank our sponsors. So Vancity has supported us from the start. They've supported the discussion around co-ops and agriculture before this conference was even conceptualized. They've been partners in working through how we speak about co-ops to the public, to policymakers, to our sector itself. They're our platinum sponsor for the event, and we're grateful for that support. So thank you. I know that we have Jag Gill, who's from Vancity here. He's not here yet this morning, and he will talk to us a little bit about Vancity's work later in the day. We also want to acknowledge the Government of Canada's Canadian Agricultural Partnership and the BC government's Feed BC initiative. Fantastic support, and also it has been exciting to be able to organize a conference that integrates so well within current policy initiatives and projects that are coming out of the ministry, to be able to think about how co-ops can respond to different policy objectives right now, and also to see what some of the exciting work that's happening. The tour last night of the STIR was amazing. I just hear the buzz to people talking about it today. For me, it was the first time being at one of the Food Hub projects, and to see how this has come together practically and respond to community needs was really eye-opening and exciting. And to imagine this happening in different ways across the province was fantastic. And we're going to hear more about that this morning now in the first session of the Food and Agriculture Conference. Going back to our sponsors, the breakfast sponsor for yesterday and again today is Valley First, which is a division of First West Credit Union. So thank you for feeding us and for your participation in the conference. It's really very much appreciated. I am just scrolling through my notes here to okay, so I was reading off of yesterday's notes, so we'll just make sure that I'm on the right day here. I will ask Paul to come up and explain some of the further logistics and arrangements for the morning. So pass it over to you, Paul. I don't have a handheld mic, so I'll just
Actually, I'm not going to talk about logistics because if I did that, I'd mess things up. Actually, I'm here just to do just some background stuff. Very excited that we're here. Second day of this. I think our muscles are getting a bit more used to seeing each other in person and actually touching things. It's quite interesting. I'm just very glad that we're here together with so many leaders, and just want to lay down a bit of thinking of where things are going to go next. And to do that, I'm going to point to someone, Murray Fulton. Murray, can you just stand up? Murray and Fulton and I had a conversation over a beer in Saskatoon about 6 years ago. And we were talking about why co-ops, why do they exist, the principles. And then we started talking about the word information asymmetrics. And after he taught me how to pronounce it, for me, it hit me that the idea of information asymmetrics, that in life and everything else, people have information and some don't. People have power and some don't. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that if you do it out of your work and building information that you have. It's issues when it's used to exploit or harm others. That happens in markets, it happens in war, it happens in many different things. For me, the idea of information asymmetrics would almost be a principle in the co-op principles. That what co-ops do is they combat information asymmetrics or power asymmetrics and make it a more level playing field. UFA did it a century ago, acting into markets. They did it when they became government in Alberta. Many of you didn't know that UFA was actually a political party at one point, and they won. And again, co-ops are not left or right, they're up. And what we're doing here is combating information asymmetrics, and you can ask Murray what that means and read some good books on that. And I just want to take it serious. So there's the momentum around this, and I think there's a thirst for this kind of stuff. People know it instinctively that things are unfair. There's an instinct to fairness, right back to tribal ages. Uncle Mike could talk about that. It's about fairness and access. It's not, and what's happening now with some great staff we have. And again, thank you so much to Michelle for organizing all this, making going and the rest of our staff. There's momentum happening with this, and we're taking very careful notes of what's happening in the conversation. So if you're having connections and conversations, talk to one of our staff about ideas. We're building resources. We got a lot of other capacity coming to us that we can take this seriously. So ideas, projects that could come forth from this side. On the co-op ag side, we're certainly taking note of a lot of those, and please talk to staff about that. We're doing a retreat with some of the key staff next week, and a big part will be unpacking what's happened and where are the best opportunities to go with the resources that we're building. And on the data side, and this is particularly for you folks overseas, and for some of you don't know, that Data Symposium is really about data asymmetrics. You know, right now, the biggest power in the world right now, and the largest companies in the world are basically data companies. They control that data. And are they using it for the best purposes? Not always, right? So that's where a co-op response is being looked at around that. And thanks to Murray and Marc-Andre and Bill Wilmican for really leading the charge on that. And really thank you those joining us from overseas, all over. We've got people from Italy, from Israel. There's about 10 different countries represented coming online. So again, a wealth of information coming from that. We've got two people in particular around that, Eva and Mario, who are going to take a really solid look at that data component and seeing what we can do next, because it's focusing on agriculture, which is a big part of it. And that's where co-ops always have a natural start. But the issue of data and co-op responses to data asymmetrics is a huge one. I think one of the biggest next stages where co-ops can play a role around that. So Mario and Eva will be taking good note on that. We're looking at some very strong responses to that in terms of supporting data co-ops, particularly agriculture and others. Just wanted to say that, and just get people that what your conversations, these discussions are very important, and we take it very seriously, and we're going to work with you to find cooperative responses to this.
Hey, and I'd like to introduce, for those of you who were here yesterday, you have had the opportunity to meet, and for those of you who are joining us today, Uncle Mike, who is going to provide a welcome to the day to us.
Why question Jaws expiation glada swapniska swapn ulach jam There's Gitches Elias Spulkocher, Glutnik Steamson, Postman, Sumak, Malasa Wakt Ali, Bean. Das sind Jauer Schulen, wobei Scott Cook Bay School. Cook Sam's kicked out of Stiesel this morning. I could a lot of the ways our people did things just before that sun came up. We greet the sun too, because it does so much for us. Like all the food we ate this morning, some of that energy's in the food. And just a few days ago, 21st, the sun was exactly over the equator. And people in the south and beginning in the north, they call that the butterfly sun. The sun being the body of the butterfly. And then the sun rays on north and the south are its wings, almost exactly balanced in this Mother Earth. And when we greet that sun, we think about those things, about the balance in ourselves, which the sun teaches us, and the energy from that sun, even though it's far away, is giving us vitamins right now and giving us light, and miracles didn't stop in 7 days. It goes on. Always goes on. The newborn robins and birds and deer and things are happening, and babies are still born, so the miracles still happen. So when we look at that sun, this is energy, and teaches us that the eagles and the ones with the feathers know what to do. The four-legged animals know what to do, and the fish know what to do, and the plants know what to do. But do we? We live in that circle of life, and we're supposed to have responsibilities of keeping that circle of life strong, like the others do. And it's not a religion or anything. That's just the way things have been. Beginning of time, including in your cultures at one time. The sun worshippers were powerful in Europe at one time, and they put a day aside for it, Sunday. And the Norsemen, they put a day aside for Wednesday. So some of those cultures were similar to ours and just been forgotten throughout the empires and the churches that they erased. They tried to erase it on us because that's why we know about their intentions were. They already had done it elsewhere in the world. So it's time in this history here to think about those things, about the great gifts that we have of the water and the air and the sun and stuff like that, because evidence all around us that this earth is not doing so well. Can't even drink the water down here out of the rivers. Two great big rivers. Can't even drink the water out of it unless you put another poison in it, chlorine, and say it's safe. and stuff like that. And when yesterday I said we're like the thermometers of how our Mother Earth is. You know, people got diabetes now, and heart problems, kidney problems, liver problems, and troubles in the mind, worry, and everything like that. You know, and if you do the proper research, you'll find it's from a lot of man-made things. You know, you're talking about co-op. You know, it's an old thing. It's not new. Our people done it, and we all work together. Like that's why we form a circle when we talk and recognize everybody that's sitting in that circle, because everyone will contribute to the tribe. You know, some may be good at taking care of children, some may be good at medicine, some may be good at fishing. they're all valuable, and the knowledge. Like there was a guy in Kelowna, he wrote a book, and he used the Western way of claiming all the knowledge that was in the book, and there was a lady and a teacher in Cannon Lake that wanted to use some of that stuff that he wrote, and they were arguing about it. And lucky my uncle was alive, and I said, two of our people are arguing about knowledge in a book. My uncle just said, oh, sit down, have a tea. But eventually he came out, he said, the knowledge us older ones learn doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the children for the future generations. End of the argument, you know, end of the argument. So what you're sharing today about this co-op, you know, it's what you're doing. Even negativity will add to your knowledge, will give you guidance what needs to be done within the group. And the most important, because I included the sun and the air and all these other things, you know, it's, all of those above give us life. The food we ate this morning is going to continue, or we're going to continue for the rest of the day. And the one who made it, a lot of times, is happy making food for others. And that's how the people will be for the rest of the day, the ones that give us some of that happiness while they're making it. Good health. Health is like number one. Health is not only of your body, but of your mind, your heart, and your spirit. To make you whole, make your whole self healthy. And all of them has got to be exercised. You know, you have it. We should know lots about a spirit, because no matter what culture you come from, they say you've got a soul or something in there. And we should know lots about it. And we've got a mind. A lot of people sometimes overuse that mind. They don't include your heart or the spirit. And when you just use your mind, things will be just only temporary. And that's what's happening to this country. You know, it's only 500 years, and that's 500 years is really tiny compared to how old this island is. And that's all it took for the water to be undrinkable, you know. And all the logging mills are shutting down, and the coal is leaving the country, and oil. What's next, you know? we got to think about it. If we're not thinking about the future for our children, then that's what we'll do. We'll deplete everything. Water has become a commodity in Dow Jones now. It has joined the monetary world. And when that happens, it means somebody else is controlling it. It's not you. And you got to, people that be working in what do you call it? Co-op. You got to take those rights back for your communities. And somebody 2,000 miles away are regulating your lives, you know, your water, your food. You got to take it back into your communities, because you know nobody knows the community better than you do. No. And that's the way it is. And I'm from, the reason I know these things is I'm outside of that system. They done that to us purposely, so we can see a lot of things, what's going on. Because our old people tell us stories about, or my uncle did anyway, he said, your God is going to die. And I was still fairly young yet, and I said, oh no. I hope it's not the same one we believe in, because people say there's only one God. But years and years later, I seen a green little piece of paper. It said, in God we trust, and that's a God that's going to die. And it's happening. Things that were worth 11 cents and 5 cents are now about $8. So if you start doing things in co-ops, you know, you got to think about those things. How are you going to help your people in the community so they can afford things, or like our culture is almost the opposite. Like our chiefs are down here, or used to be. It's not like that now. They made different kind of chiefs from the government. Used to be down here and they held up everything. But now they put them up here and have everything below them. And they try to make us like that. Our chiefs are supposed to hold up everything, hold the people up, and hold the food up that feeds them, and hold up their health, keep them. We're only as healthy as our mother. What I mean by that is we're only healthy as our mother, the earth. And that's why we must keep her healthy. And people can do that because it's only a short history you can go back to, and all of the stuff that happened in those 500 years. Your culture has written it down. Some of the greatest rivers on this continent are undrinkable from start to finish. You know, so, you know, I'm not a doomsday speaker or anything like that. I know these things because they try to do that to us, and where I live, there's hardly any deer, hardly any salmon in the rivers, and all the trees are gone. And that's mostly from poor management. You know, you got to take those management things back to among the people. If you're going to say this is your land, take care of it. Take care of your health. Take care of your mother. Gives you your home, gives you your food, your medicines, gives you the weather. And a lot of you are in a place here of higher learning. You should know those things. What do you do to the earth affects you, affects everybody. You know. And today, I don't. I say things a lot of people don't dare say because of their jobs or got stipulations for their jobs and stuff like that. But you got to take those responsibilities back. Those caring about the things that give us life. And we will start becoming healthy again. If you look into your own families, you'll know what I'm talking about. The ones that got cancer and all these diabetes and problems in the head and worry about staying alive. So co-ops can help one another. All of you here are your own therapists. You can help one another. You know, you can help, especially for the younger ones, so they don't suffer the same things in the future. I said in my words, I said, very thankful for the ones that made the food to keep us going throughout this day, and for the sun that starts the energy for everything else here, for the new life that's coming, baby deer and trees and flowers are coming. That's our new year. They put the one you have, they put in the middle of winter when everything is dormant, you know. But this is a new year for us. And we should be renewing ourselves, coming out of our winter homes and sharpening our tools for food gathering and taking care of the earth. So I thank you for listening. And, you know, if there's anybody wants to disagree or agree, I'll be sitting over there and we can talk. You know, I know when I say things, it brings up a lot of questions. It shouldn't actually, but it does. Because you're in a place of higher learning. I always thought they knew all these things. You know, I haven't got any of that too high grades in the Western way of learning. Grade 1 or 12 or whatever. I'm the smartest one in grade 2 for 8 years. But also I say those things because some things when people gather, especially nowadays, get pretty darn heavy and pretty darn serious, especially when you're talking about other people's cultures. Yeah. So there's got to be a little humor in there sometimes. Yeah. And help one another, you know, for the sake of Mother Earth. We're in very dire times right now. You got to take that seriously. You know, got to take that very seriously. War going on, and they're going to bring in more people from Europe here, and they'll be putting them on Shuhapam land, you know. And Trudeau is going to get all the credit for that. You know. Nice guy, giving our land away. But work together. If you got any qualms with one another, work it out while you're here. Walk together. You get to know each other better. You'll get to know each other's culture a little better when you walk together, walk side by side for the day. Because in the end, you're going to find out we may be all going in the same direction anyway. So I thank you all for listening and let's be friends.
Okay, thank you. And Marc-Andre, did you want to come up? Yeah. So for our first panel for the Food and Agriculture Co-op Conference this morning, our moderator is Paul. And Paul at the back of the room. Hey, Paul. You're the moderator for the first session. Yeah, so come on up. We're discussing the Feed BC program in institutional markets and the potential role for co-ops. So I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, can I get my fellow presenters up with me? Okay, thanks, folks. Just grab your quick coffee. So very happy to be talking about this next session in terms of institutional markets and how to access those. Certainly, it's an issue of scale, and we know one of the secret sauces of co-ops is actually getting to scale if they do that in a coordinated manner. So exploring the challenges and possibilities of this is the reason for this panel. Very delighted to have the people here who many I've known for quite some time. And I'll have them, each of them, talk about themselves slightly when they come through. But we do have Christina Boris, who's with the Ministry of Agriculture. She's been not only for this presentation, but she's been one of the key leads in helping organize this from the ministry's perspective. So I think we owe her a hand for that. Thank you very much for that. Dave Moore, I've known for quite some time, probably 10 years on the video. First time I've met in person, and fantastic to see him. Kind of epitomizes leadership in the co-op sector in terms of being dogged, stubborn, good looking too, and we'll tell his story from one, I think, one of the more interesting, innovative co-ops in the country. Darren, I've known actually when you were working at Spud, Small Potatoes Urban Delivery. And remember us, we were working together on food stuff, and then we'd sit down and talk about that. We get into a philosophical conversation about something, and it was great. But glad to see him still in the sector. He got his feet dirty on the ground and is certainly applying it in terms of helping food systems across the province. And finally, but not least at all, I think we really have to be happy with Jessica for the food that your team has produced. It's been fantastic. I think I've been to many, many conferences. There's got to be some of the best food I've had. Would you guys agree? And she's going to talk about what they've been doing here in terms of access from an institutional perspective. So without further ado, let's take it away. I believe, Chris, oh, yep, sorry, Jessica's going first. Go ahead.
Hello, there we go. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Thompson Rivers University. My name is Jessica Papineau, and I'm the Food Service Operations Manager here at TRU. Prior to joining TRU, I was the Food Service Director with Airmark, who is our food service company on campus. So I do have a lot of experience when it comes to the institutional side of things, as well as from a larger global corporation as a contractor. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel and to speak to you briefly about Thompson Rivers University's partnership with Feed BC. TRU is very proud to be one of the 20 public secondary institutions that are Feed BC partners. It was a very easy decision for TRU to be part of this impactful program, as it is a great fit for TRU's values. One of TRU's values is community mindedness and the coming together to help one another, which we all do that a lot when we come together for meals. Another value is sustainability. As we strive to be a world leader in sustainability, we know that the well-being of the generations to come is what's going to shape, well, what we do today is what's going to be shaping. When we think of these values, the Feed BC program was a very, very natural fit for us. As a new partner, we've spent some time doing a lot of behind the scenes work to be able to successfully track our purchases and to identify opportunities to bring in more BC local foods. We've been working on this for about the last 2 years. But it wasn't until really the start of this year that we were really kind of able to take some time and really, really dive into it. It has been with the progress that we've made, there has been quite a few challenges that we've been faced. Obviously, the number one challenge, which I'm sure everybody has been kind of facing right now, is the pandemic. The pandemic significantly slowed down our progress since most of our food service locations here at TRU were closed for about a year and a half, and our catering sales drastically dropped. This is actually the second large catering event that we have pretty much done in about 2 years. It's been fantastic to be able to get back to it, but it has been a long time since we've been doing this. Another challenge with COVID is we've been faced with significant staffing shortages and high turnover at our food service locations and with our food service provider in the management. That's kind of taken away our ability to really, really focus on this program and what we needed to do to really push it forward. One of the other things too is although students and employees have returned to campus, the foot traffic actually on campus is down from pre-pandemic levels, which has resulted in us making some very difficult decisions to close a few of our locations, including one that we would normally highlight a lot of local foods. Another challenge that we've faced has been coming with working with our on-campus food service provider. While they are supportive and willing to bring in new suppliers, they would obviously prefer that any suppliers that we bring in is on their supplier list and has been approved. And if not, they are more than willing to bring them in, but it can be a very lengthy and cumbersome process, and oftentimes doesn't guarantee that that supplier is going to get approved. Another challenge we face at TRU is that we actually don't have a meal plan program, which a lot of other universities do. So this limits our buying flexibility that comes with these types of foods. All of our food service locations on campus are retail based. And the price point oftentimes for retail based food is very much comes into play, especially when you're on a university campus. Lastly, we strive to source as close to Kamloops as possible. And Kamloops and the surrounding area are really limited to food suppliers compared to the Lower Mainland. So a large portion of our BC suppliers do come from the Lower Mainland versus directly from here in Kamloops. And we're really, really trying very hard to increase our suppliers that are local to Kamloops. So despite these challenges, we've made some progress. Last year, 21% of our food purchases were from BC suppliers. We're very proud of that. And we are going to continue to push forward to make sure we're increasing that numbers. We're actually tracking all of our stuff right now for this year. So we're really hoping, even though we've had some challenges this year, that we were able to kind of push that bar. This year, we've been able to include a number of suppliers that are local to Kamloops. One which was TRU Honey, which is actually honey that one of the programs here helps with. We've featured Twisted Goat Coffee, which is a local Kamloops roaster, and Fresh is Best Salsa Company. Another positive item to highlight is that we've found opportunities each semester here on campus to promote our local BC food suppliers. This includes our food service provider doing local tabling events every semester, highlighting all the local products that we carry, where you can get it, and also really trying to promote. We have a label that goes on every single thing that's local, really trying to make sure everybody understands what that label is and what exactly local is. Pre-pandemic, we had some suppliers come in and do sampling events, which was fantastic. Everybody on campus loves free food and samples. So those have always went over really, really well. But unfortunately, the pandemic has stopped those. So we're really hoping that in the future, we're able to continue those. And then we've also done like a BC Suppliers Week, where on our social media, so we have an Instagram account that's actually fairly very active, and we do have quite a few followers. We do a social media campaign where we highlight some of the local products that we carry, where you can get it on location. We talk about the food, a local food label that we have. And then we also do a blog post. We have, it's called News Nibbles. It's a blog that we have that's for food services that's specifically on campus. We started that so that we can try and get information like this out to the campus. So we did a blog post that talks about anything that's kind of new with our local BC suppliers. And then kind of highlighting some of the food that's across campus. So we kind of try and do that in like a week, which actually surprisingly, coincidentally, is this week that we were doing it. So we've had some great success with that. So overall, we know we have a lot more work to do. Like I said, the pandemic really kind of pushed us back a little bit. I was on maternity leave for 18 months, and there was some pretty major gaps. So now that I'm back and we have a pretty stable management team, it's definitely something that we're really, really focusing on and hope to bring more local suppliers for the fall. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for that. You can, I hate it when I don't have. That's not right. This is information asymmetrics at play right now. He's got too much power. No, I thank you for that, Jessica, and not to put you on the spot, but maybe from the audience, particularly interested in how co-ops can work with, in this case, academic institutions in terms of provision, what could work with that. I know there's some great stories out there. So from the audience and online, we want to hear about those and how we can, as a co-op movement, work with yourselves to actually improve access to locals. So
Definitely.
we'll move on to Christina.
Good. Well, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to be here. My name is Christina Boris. I'm the Senior Manager of Value Chain Innovation with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries. BC's public institutions feed thousands of clients every day through 170 hospitals and long-term care facilities, 25 universities and colleges, close to 1,600 public schools, 10 regional corrections facilities, wildfire and emergency work camps, and other programs and services. There we go. Feed BC aims to bring more BC foods to these institutions that serve BC citizens every day. And over the next 10 minutes, I will introduce you to Feed BC and a short introduction and overview to the institutional food services market in BC, what it looks like, who's part of it, some of the considerations for selling to this market, and also some of the ways that co-ops can provide potential solutions for accessing this market. So Feed BC is a provincial government priority initiative that is led by the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries, along and supported by ministries across the province to encourage, inspire, and support a shift to more BC foods in hospitals, residential care facilities, public post-secondary institutions, and other government-supported facilities and programs where food is purchased. And in bringing more BC foods to BC public sector institutions, Feed BC aims to, and this is at the foundation of Feed BC, is to support jobs and businesses for farmers, fishers, ranchers, and food processors and their communities across this province. Feed BC also aims to stimulate economic development and more recently economic recovery to grow the provincial food supply and our resilience as a food system across this province. Feed BC also aims to meet the growing demand that we're hearing from campuses like TRU, from their students and their faculty, from hospital patients, their families, for more local food. And so Feed BC does this in a fairly unique way, in what we call a whole supply chain approach that really is unique in efforts in Canada to bring more local food to government facilities. As Jessica mentioned there's contracted food services involved. There's many different players involved in the institutional food market. And so Feed BC works across the supply chain with producers, processors, distributors, group purchasing organizations, contracted food service companies, institutions, and their purchasers to work on connecting both supply and demand. And so through Feed BC, we work with all of these different partners to try to do four things. The first is to increase the awareness and demand for BC products in public institutions and beyond, working with people like Jessica and her team to ensure that institutional food services are aware of BC products and that they're asking for them in different ways. The second is work, and in conjunction with many other ministry programs, we support the capacity and market readiness of BC food and beverage producers and processors, helping them to get ready for this market, whether that's something they're ready for now or ready for 5 years down the road. Things like business development and food safety training, new tools, resources, services, market readiness coaching, for example. The third important part of this is really to connect that supply and demand. So we're trying to build the demand, ensure there's the right supply, but then we want to grow the value chains in between. And so growing that value chain innovation and supply chain solutions so that we're connecting that demand with the BC foods that institutions need and really activating those business opportunities for our producers and processors. And we do this through a number of different ways. Our value chain innovation service provides product sourcing support. So for institutions looking for BC products, we'll do the legwork for them to help find the right producers and processors that might be out there. We help facilitate new value chains for products that are most needed by institutions. And we also host business to business events. We had a really fun and exciting product pitch session last week where 9 new and emerging food processors pitched their products directly to healthcare and post-secondary buyers on the island. And we also facilitate introductions. Sometimes the hardest thing is just finding who to talk to. And so we can help do that by facilitating those introductions. And of course, showcasing success stories and partnerships and tracking, as Jessica mentioned, is a really critical part of mapping that progress. So what is the institutional market in BC? What does it look like? So this market, the institutions in BC collectively purchase approximately $414 million worth of food every year. And the majority of this food goes to public sector institutions, but also included in that figure are private retirement homes and some semi-private facilities as well. And these institutions can offer a significant and relatively stable opportunity for interested BC producers and processors who can meet the product needs and requirements. And I'll come back to that in a minute. The institutional market and the supply chains are fairly complex. As I mentioned, there's lots of different players in procurement processes, and institutional food services can look really different, even within healthcare from one region to another. And so Feed BC works with 2 sectors, primarily right now. The first is post-secondary institutions. There are 25 public post-secondary institutions in BC, and 20 of them, including TRU, are proud Feed BC partners. And food service on post-secondary institution campuses can be provided in a couple different ways: in residence cafeterias, pubs, cafes, and as we're benefiting at this event, through catering. And campuses can have a mix of different food service outlets and operating models. And so for a smaller producer or processor, this can increase the flexibility, maybe lower volume requirements, and then it increases the opportunities for both small and large producers and processors to participate. Many campuses are seeing local food as an opportunity to advance other campus goals like sustainability or social procurement. And to be a Feed BC partner, it means that an institution has committed to working towards a goal of 30% or a minimum of 30% of their food budgets going to BC Foods. And they also commit to other local food initiatives, which are tailored to meet their own needs. And so at some Universities, that can be signage in the cafeteria to promote their local menus. At some other places, it could mean big shifts in their culinary training programs, like Camosun College on the island that is trying to shift to 100% local protein. We've also had significant gains. For example, the University of Northern British Columbia, just in the last 2 years, has gone from 20% to almost 40% local food by working with their contracted food service company, which is Dana Hospitality. In healthcare, Feed BC was able to build on a long legacy of health authority involvement and championing of local food. And for those of you who were on the tour of the Food Hub last night and knowing the roots that the Kamloops Food Policy Council has coming out of a health authority dietitian, those links to local food and our health authorities are decades old in BC. And so building on that, all 6 regional health authorities in BC are Feed BC partners, and this includes hospitals and their long-term care facilities, so about 170 facilities across the province. What's interesting about health authorities is, unlike other provinces in BC, the menu planning and the purchasing contracts in health authorities are done for the whole health authority, not just individual institutions. And so most food, because of that scale, is purchased through a broadline distributor, so such as Cisco or Gordon Food Services, and they're really important partners in Feed BC. Health authorities participate in Feed BC by tracking towards 30%. With the last tracking report that came out just before the pandemic, BC health authorities were spending an average of 30.8%, so had already hit that 30% target of their food expenditures going to BC Foods. And that translated into a measurable change of $3.5 million, an increase of $3.5 million in just 1 year. That was between year 1 and year 2 of Feed BC. We should have the next results of that tracking coming soon, and this will be the report where we see the effects of the pandemic. So we do anticipate that to decline a little bit, but health authorities remain very committed. There are other institutions that Feed BC is starting to work with, like public schools and correctional facilities. These 2 I've mentioned today are really where the focus of our work has been. I just wanted to share some quick success stories of products, because there are so many good stories, even despite the pandemic. Goodly Foods, which makes soups and other products out of reclaimed vegetables that would otherwise go to waste, are now selling 4 different soups into Fraser Health. And part of what prompted that was when Campbell's Soups was having shortages across the supply chain, and they just couldn't get their soups. And so Fraser Health had connections through Feed BC with Goodly Foods, and they now have 4 soups going there. Other health authorities that are interested. They're also selling to UBC and to SFU. Baraka Eats, which is one of the companies that pitched to some post-secondary institutions at an event last year. They produced prepared meals, South Asian prepared meals. They're now selling to Vancouver Island University. We also have Daybreak Eggs, which is a fairly large egg producer in Terrace, and they are federally inspected operations, so met that food safety requirement to sell to health authorities. And so Northern Health is now supplying all of its facilities with Daybreak Eggs from Terrace, which is the first Northern supplier to be selling in to Northern Health. So that's a big success. Each of those stories can take months to happen, as I'm sure Jessica knows. And so we get to boast about the success stories and definitely need to give credit for all the work that happens behind. So just briefly, some of the things to consider about this market. It can be a rewarding yet complex process. And generally, food businesses that sell to this market need to maintain consistent volumes. And UBC, for example, is the largest food service operation in the province. It's bigger than any restaurant, any hotel, right? So just think about that scale, but then you also have many small institutions as well. They need to meet a high standard for food safety, for traceability, and this is paramount, especially, it's important all the time, but especially when you're working with immunocompromised populations, such as in healthcare. Many of these institutions rely on broadline or regional distributors to stock and deliver their products. And so selling to this market often involves working with them, and also wholesale pricing. So margins may be lower, yet volumes tend to be higher. And so there can be opportunities for cost efficiency. There's definitely a need for pricing flexibility. For example, there might be longer payment terms than typical when you're doing more direct sales. And there can be other requirements for things like packaging, zero waste, other products that might be in demand. We're seeing a lot of demand for plant-based products right now. Co-ops provide an opportunity for overcoming some of these solutions, especially for small and medium producers and processors, especially helping smaller producers achieve the scale and consistency of supply that is required by this market. Island Vegetable Co-op, Island Farms or Saputo, BC Tree Fruit, those are some of the examples of co-ops that are selling to institutions right now. And I think co-ops can also offer shared solutions for things like distribution and co-packing and marketing, other aspects that can be barriers for small and medium producers wanting to access this market. We also know in the US, and I don't know much about this, I'll be curious if anyone else does, about school food purchasing co-ops, where school meal programs are actually aggregating their demand for products, including local in their criteria. So would love to hear if anybody else knows more about that. I would like to just put a plug in for one of the key Feed BC projects that just launched last week. And we have been hearing since the beginning of Feed BC about from buyers who say, can't you just make it easier for us to find the BC products that meet our needs? And so the Feed BC directory is the first directory in BC geared to products that are ready for food service or wholesale or retail. So if there's any producers or processors in the room or you know of them in your network that are ready for these markets, I'd love to talk to them, and they can come down to the booth afterwards or look for more information on our website here with Feed BC. The institutional market can be a complex and sometimes daunting market to get into, but our team at Feed BC is here to help with business information, resources, and just help navigating. And so thank you so much for the opportunity to introduce Feed BC. And I look forward to hearing from you downstairs or later.
Thanks
Thank you.
very much for that. And just to appreciate the complexity of it and everything around that. And I know people in the audience here can talk to you after. Do you have staff here particularly you could point out that they might want to
Yes.
talk to, just in case?
Yeah, Sarah and Jennifer are there from the ministry as
Okay.
well, and all of us can help direct you in the right to the right people and places. So thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Now, Darren, we've heard about the complexity of this, and I know one of your jobs is to help to unpack some of the complexity on this as a consultant for many groups. So very interested in seeing how you believe this complexity can be unpacked, and particularly how co-ops might play a role.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks everyone, and thanks BC Co-op for having me present today. And it's great to be here and see some familiar faces. And I've been involved with Feed BC as well with Christina and her team, and it really is a great, an amazing program that's done some great things over the years. And what I want to talk about is how small and medium-sized producers can kind of work together to access that market. So before that, so I'm Darren Stott with Green Chain Consulting, and we support local food businesses to be more awesome through better planning. And before that, as Paul mentioned before, I was Director of Purchasing with Spud. And then before that, I was in food retail out of university in the UK. And my first job was with a business called Cooperative Retail Services in a town in Rochdale, just outside Manchester. And so if my history is right, I think they have roots to the first co-op that ever came out, and well over 150 years ago. So it's that was my first job out of university, working for that company. And one of the things Green Chain specializes in is food hubs. And so since leaving Spud, I did a lot of sourcing with local suppliers and local growers. And so since then, I've been working with them and how to access the markets. And a lot of that is direct marketing with farmers markets and CSAs and gate sales. And then obviously a lot of them kind of like, well, what's the next step for me? How do I access bigger markets? And that's where Food Hubs kind of came into it. Am I pressing the right one? There we go. So Food Hubs is a very kind of lofty description, and people have different interpretations of it. The Ministry of Agriculture has their own definition that pertains a lot around food processing. And I know some of you went to the Stir yesterday, and Kent gave a tour of that. And so a lot of those are popping up around BC, and I'll talk about those in a bit later on. And then the USDA has their own definition as well. And down in the States, Food Hubs have been going a good number of years now. And theirs is a lot around distribution and marketing together. But what the commonality between all these definitions really is local food being aggregated together, local food businesses collaborating together to access the local market. And so that whether that's shared facilities, whether that's just collaborating together from marketing perspective, sharing trucks, that type of thing. That's like the commonality between all of those things. And, the definition of hub is where it's all kind of like coming together like a hive. And so the National Good Food Network down in the States does a lot of research around food hubs and provides a lot of support. And so I just want to share they do some research. I just want to share some stats with you. You can see what the sector of food hubs is doing right now. So it's been going a good number of years, probably well over 10 years. They've been tracking this. And there's hundreds and hundreds of them now across North America. And on average, they support around about 80 local producers. So some of them obviously are significantly higher than that, some of them less than that. And they'll employ around about 6 staff. So whether that's drivers or pickers or in the processing facility, support there. Around on average again, so this is average looking at individual food hubs, 90% of participating producers are defined as small and medium size. So, these food hubs, these collaborations is predominantly for small and medium sized producers to access the bigger markets, so the institutional markets we're talking about. And that seems to be most of the goals of food hubs as well. And they're actually collaborating. A lot of these food hubs are working with mainline distributors like Cisco and GFS and others as well. 42% are non-profits, 37% for-profits, 18% co-ops, and few and far between here in BC, unfortunately. So that's kind of a question I want to pose to the group and have conversations with you this morning, and why we've not got a lot of food hub co-ops here in British Columbia, and how can we get more of them? And 3% are publicly owned, so either supported by universities or other public institutions. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that was a skip. So here's an example of one. So this is a co-op. So in Western Montana, Growers Co-op. It's been going a good number of years. And I like to talk about this one because they've been going about 20 years now. And it's obviously in a remote part of the United States. And so it's not as though like they've got a really easy market into delivering into New York or Los Angeles or anything like that. But they work with, I think they work with about 60 suppliers scattered across Western Montana and aggregating all their product in a central warehouse in Missoula. And they do about $3 million a year. And they actually collaborate with their competitors. I mean, typical cooperative, mission. And why they do that is so they can kind of distribute over this really wide area and, have some efficiencies with their trucking. And obviously in certain times of the year, the amount of food that's available is going to be a lot less. So these trucks would be half empty, if not a quarter of an empty. So again, they're kind of collaborating not only amongst the producers to get their product to market, but then they'll collaborate with their competitors just to get product out to Portland and other parts of Montana. And I will talk a bit more about food hubs in BC a bit later on. And then we've got Dave here from River Select, who is going to talk specifically about his food co-op. But what I wanted to talk about is there's some research that we've done that again was sponsored by the Ministry of Agriculture in just looking at what was out there within British Columbia. And so we did some research in 2019 and we identified around about 90 what you might perceive as this very broad definition of food hubs, whether it's processing or distribution or marketing or multi-farm CSAs. And we interviewed around about 25 of them, so some in BC, but also some just outside as well, just to try and learn some best practice of how to operate them. And some of them weren't operating anymore, some of them are operating and at different scales as well, or maybe even just started up. And I actually helped set up one of these food hubs as well in Vancouver, the Vancouver Farmers Market Direct. So we kind of really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty here and try and understand what was going on and trying to share that best practice. So one of the key things I wanted to get across today is we have got lots of resources to help establish food hubs here in BC. And so I posted some of that on Hoover, and the Ministry of Agriculture has got that as well. So there's frequently asked questions on there. There's resources to link in to do more research on food hubs and who are the funders out there as well. So I'm going to quickly go through some of the findings, but there's more detail in those resources. So as I mentioned, we kind of went throughout the whole of BC to try and identify all these food hubs, whether it's distribution or processing, some of the larger ones like BC Fresh, commercial kitchens, agri-food innovation centers, and just try and get a really good understanding of what they're doing. And also across different types of food sectors as well, whether it's the seafood industry or meat food hubs, food processing, or primary agriculture, fruit and vegetables. So just quickly, some of the benefits of food hubs, and this is like business 101 and very typical of collaborations, but I'm very typical of cooperatives as well. Why do we kind of all want to come together here and work together? So obviously, if you've got, like I was saying, on average, there's around about 70, 80 producers that work with these. So it's going to be a lot of expertise there that you can all rely on and share that across. There's going to be some trust there amongst each other. And they can also refer like-minded businesses or businesses to fill those gaps as well. There's going to be a really big network to rely on to bring other producers into it. And it's really important to have a strong shared values there to kind of work together on, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to provide more local food to the institutions, for example. Are we trying to, strengthen our food systems here and just kind of like, have that common goal that they're all trying to work towards. And also just filling any gaps and shorts that might occur as well. So it's the kind of benefits to having multiple suppliers. I'm sorry. And then financial benefits as well. And so obviously when you've got several dozens and dozens of suppliers, then each of them can invest in the food hub as well. And that's one of the benefits of food hubs, is not just trying to access the market and have enough supply, but also sharing the costs. And I think the Stir is a perfect example of that. If we look at some of the suppliers that are in there, no way could they afford an amazing facility that costs, I think, 1.5 million themselves. But obviously they could share those costs out and share the cost of the equipment as well. And some of them will have their own business, and they can roll that business into the food hub as well and bring their customers to that. And maybe they've even got their own equipment as well, and they can share that, and obviously sharing labor costs at the same time. Other things, the time and resources as well. So you can all rely on each other with that extra time that you can invest. And you've got different skills to bring into the food hub. And then some of them probably will invest their own time as well without any cost to that. So some of the challenges we might have. Oh, sorry, am I skipping? Yeah.
There's no challenges.
No, there's no challenges. Yeah, I need to rephrase that, don't we? Some of the opportunities here. So just yeah, let's just skip on to it. So yeah, there might be a lack of capital. So sorry, I'm just kind of going with back and forth here. And so even though there is going to be lots of producers, especially when we're talking small and medium-sized ones. Obviously, their capital is invested in their own business. And the reason why they're collaborating together is because, you know, just they haven't got enough money to make those investments. So sometimes that obviously can be a challenge there as well. And their resources are kind of stretched with their own business. So some of that kind of come into play. And then that financial things as well. Oh, sorry, I keep going back and forwards. I need this big green button here.
Dancing.
Yeah. So knowledge and experience are all kind of learning and how to work together. So I mean, kind of comes into managing a cooperative here. How do we collaborate? It is 70 producers. Like how does that all get managed? And there's going to be different personalities, and how do you get all through that? So conflict of interest and having that producer focus and customer focus. That was a big challenge we had at Vancouver Farmers Market Direct as well. It's like, you know, we want a certain price, for example, but obviously the customer wants a certain price, and getting the product at the right time to the right people, and making sure that it all works together. And then just my last slide, and what I want to share with you is just what we identified through all this research and all these conversations that we had is, you know, what are the key things to the success of these food hubs? We talked to ones that weren't successful anymore. We talked to ones that have been going a good number of years, and obviously we looked at food hubs down in the States. And again, this is kind of like, it's not rocket science whatsoever, but so I just want to emphasize how important these ones are. So forming those key partnerships, and especially from the start as well, even before you've established the food hub, or before you establish the co-op, you know, make sure that you all identify with that common goal, you all identify with what you're trying to do as an organization, and that it aligns with your business as well. Establish those key resources early on, and understand what you'll need, what investments you'll need going forward. So it's really great that we have the Ministry of Agriculture supporting these food hubs, being established here in BC, and providing some grant money to invest in these facilities, because they're obviously, you know, very expensive to do that, and allow them to establish themselves over a good number of years. They're not very profitable for the first year or two, as you know, you're trying to build up capacity. And so again, it comes down to that planning and really understanding what you're getting yourselves into, and making sure that you understand what the costs are of that business, but also that you've got enough resources to cover that. Obviously attracting and maintaining customers, but the key thing here is maintaining those customers, and making sure that you've got really strong retention and looking after them. Establish the right mix of customers. So here, what we found out with food hubs is, and this is where I think the institutions play a really important part, is that identifying really anchor customers was key. So having that big volume being pulled through was really important. But with Vancouver Farmers Market Direct, we had great relationships with UBC and SFU, and their volume was significantly higher than restaurants. I mean, restaurants, surprisingly enough, don't buy as much food as like big households, which was quite surprising to me. So it's like one thing saying you have 40 customers, but if you have like 2 or 3 really key customers that buy a lot of volume, that's really key. Clear champion and strong managers. So, you know, you've got 70 suppliers, you maybe got 70 to 100 customers plus, and you know, you're talking local food here as well, and people may be buying a bit more premium product just to access that local food. So someone who understands all that, understands farming, understands food processing, understands the retail food service side, is really important to bring in and run your food hub. And cultivate highly engaged food producers. So even at the start, as I mentioned before, it's important to make sure you get the right group, but then going forward, as with cooperatives, is making sure that everyone is contributing. One co-op I was trying to establish in the Okanagan didn't really take off. It was because people just put their money in, these farmers just put their money in and thought, okay, you do it for me. And that obviously just didn't work. You know, the producers need to be involved with running of the food hub. Set a path to profitability, obviously business 101, and just really understanding the key thing here is margins. And I tell my clients that quite a lot, is just understand what your margins are and how important it is to have a strong margin to pay all those costs. And you know, and when I say that, 1 or 2% difference can really make a difference between make or break. And then secure the right level of funding, as I was mentioned before, and to secure those kind of right resources and investments that you need to make. So as I mentioned before, there's lots of resources posted on Hoover that, and then happy to obviously have conversations as well after this. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Darren. I just actually am amiss in saying that I'm actually moderating this panel. I have a great interest in it, but who was supposed to moderate was a gentleman called Stephen Evans, who's actually working one of the food hubs down in Mission area, I believe. Strong co-op background, some of you know him, and he's got some very interesting perspectives on that as what could work there. So he was very much involved in the planning sessions for this whole conference. Unfortunately, with the shift he was elsewhere. So we consider Stephen part of our team. And so some of the stimulating discussion here, I think, to bring forward, and he may be another contact for those of you in the food hub area to talk more with. I know he would have lots of comments to say that I will not try to say it because he's much more articulate. I want to apologize to you because I called you stubborn, Dave, but I think that's a quality for sure, particularly as a co-op leader. I think there's always that piece with any business, but with co-ops, you need a market, you need finance. And those are actually not that hard to do. You can actually find a market, you can find fans. And what I find the hardest is management and expertise. That's, I think, in any business, but particularly in the co-op sector where you work a lot, you sweat a lot, and likely could do something else that pays you far more. I know that. I'm sure that's the case for you, but you're still here. You're stubborn. So I admire you for that. As an intro to why you're still doing what you're doing, and tell us about some of the challenges and opportunities you're facing.
Okay, thank you. For starters, I'm going to throw a left hook. Would you mind if I move down to the microphone on the very end there so I can, my notes are on my slides. I'm getting old and I need to be able to see them. This one work? Oh, look at that. All right, this is a microphone for short guys. So as a preamble, according to Fisheries and Oceans Canada, the annual value of Canada's seafood industry is an estimated $6.6 billion and employs 72,000 people. Indigenous fishing communities represent only 2.5% of this income and only 4.2% of Canada's fisheries, primarily as seasonal fishers. Surprisingly, given that you can't find a First Nation in the country that's not adjacent to a fishery. Our story begins with a group of First Nations who are fishing communities on BC's biggest salmon rivers that were going extinct. Well, I'm a 40-year veteran fisheries technician, actually. I began in this work in the late 80s with the Shuswap Nation Tribal Council, working for the Secwepemc. I was commissioned back then to find out what happened to our salmon fisheries and why, and what do we need to do to get them back. And that led me onto a journey working with First Nations across the Fraser, the Columbia, and eventually across Canada and internationally to help restore Indigenous fisheries and the role of Indigenous people in the protection of their food security and their fisheries. How are we doing there, Rob? Okay. Is that a go? So we share a common problem. Global competition for limited seafood resources has marginalized many local fishing communities, threatening the survival of marine biological diversity, as well as the food and livelihoods of Indigenous communities who depend on their local fisheries. These fisheries improve community investment and control over their fishery, promoting less impact on local fish ecosystems and food security, while improving economic performance and local benefits. They're proven to be more sustainable by fostering local stewardship and protecting local fish populations and fishing cultures, just as they have for thousands of years. We've been learning from successful local branding, value adding, and marketing from inland fisheries since 2014. In fact, Darren Stott helped us get on our feet, figure out how to do supply chain engineering and to work together. Our friends from the BC Cooperative Association were really helpful in organizing and structuring our first cooperative, and we've been expanding from there. So our work is really about building the supply chains and building market access for community fisheries. And our market access is based on authentic fisheries profiles, stories, and images. And every label, every package, every product has a QR code on it that provides a guarantee of authenticity to the community fishery of origin. And for the market, it provides a window into a network of authentic Indigenous fisheries brands. We've worked our way through the development of frozen and shelf-stable fish products. And that's helped us grow market scope from fresh fish to shelf-stable products and access to markets, a much broader range of markets, including Amazon in Canada and Amazon in the States. And of course, with some benefit from the silver lining, you might say, from the pandemic, we were able to get more actively involved in drop shipping across the country. We are lucky to have in-house executive chefs who have helped us to connect the qualities of the unique fish products, each of the unique fish products to different recipes and to highlight and emphasize the unique properties of each of those fisheries. And now we're more than just river salmon fisheries. We've expanded our scope and are working across the coast of British Columbia and most recently across Canada. We're working, one of our most remote communities is the Pangertung fisheries on Baffin Island, a really cool fishery. These guys are hand lining 1.2 million pounds of turbot through about 3 meters of ice and a kilometer of water. That's a cool fishery. So locally branded seafood, it's about where and what fish are being caught and what our consumers can learn about where their food is coming from. So we are locally branded seafood, national supply chain collaboration to assist our fishers and communities in the supply chain, the value chain together. Some of our most significant program partners include Vancity. They've been with us since the very beginning, helping us to understand our fiscal and administrative challenges and to work through our growth with the help of cooperative experts in the country, the BC Cooperative Association I mentioned. We've had help from Community Foundations of Canada and Vancouver Foundation. Community Evolution helps us with our community development work. The National Institute on Indigenous Fisheries helps us with our broader scaling of our programming. A big part of our work is to develop shared supply chains and market access for authentic Indigenous seafoods and assist community investment into their own fisheries, including the infrastructure necessary to optimize environmental, economic, and social viability of their fisheries. We have a success team that is accessible to the communities we work with. We provide best practices experience from across the country, financial systems to cash flow value adding for each brand, and bonded contracts, that help secure community investment in their own fisheries. Our experienced logistics team helps to organize seafood production and market access, things like traceability, packaging, labeling, distribution, etc. And we share access to a whole range of service accounts with processing and cold storage facilities and refrigerated transport across the country and to export markets. one of our key pieces of our evolution, and again, this started with Darren. We just got really tired of redesigning the supply chain engineering every time we had a new client and a new product. So we developed an interactive spreadsheet model, and after about 15 years of work, it became quite refined. It's the first thing we do now with new clients. We sit them down, we profile their fisheries, we break their fisheries into their constituent parts, and we model out an interactive dashboard so that they can pull the levers back and forth and watch the dials and see what the best thing to do to make the most profits or the most benefits of whatever shape or form they might see in the community. We have an inside running joke about when we work with these local fisheries, the first thing they ask is not how much profit can we make, but how can we just break even? And what that really speaks to is the broad range of the values that they bring to the table, in addition to the profit bottom line. So that our modeling helps to risk manage and simulates the investment options to guide value adding decisions, and helps them with that break-even analysis, often used to balance those local benefits. We have a logistics system in place through HACCP certified processing plants and facilities across the country. We have Darren spoke about a food hub. Ostensibly what we are is we operate a seafood hub that helps these small brands aggregate and work together to create efficiencies so we can operate like a large fish company without diluting the local brands. We do product and package engineering for local brands to reach domestic and international markets. Our shared online seafood commodity auction houses help separate communities and their fishermen from dealing with brokers and sacks full of money, which was a pretty distasteful element of the trade environment in fisheries across the world. So our online bidding platform operates to provide access to local fisheries to the commodity markets in a healthy and transparent way. So we have up to 500 companies registered. They bid on the local products. We then provide the options back to the communities. They choose the buyer and the marketplace they want their fish to go to. And then they use their spreadsheet models. They use their dashboard. This is a really interesting sort of facet of how they look at their fisheries. They'll use their dashboard to decide how much they want to go into the commodity markets. And then they begin to divert, once they've covered the cost of their fishery, they begin to divert their products into the value added stream so that they can improve the profit margins on their local fishery, which became a really critical piece of the lesson from our origin days, where these small scale river salmon fisheries weren't even making enough profit to cover their basic costs. And that's the reason they were going extinct. So this gives the ability for small communities to small artisanal fisheries to work again. Our web retail provides us drop shipping to markets across Canada. I mentioned Amazon accounts in Canada and US, and we're independent from big brands. And that was one of our biggest hurdles probably in our journey is you have to work with your competitors in order to get your fish processed. We can't run our own processing plants across the country, but then they're the competition as well. So at first it was conflict, and it's evolved into kind of a happy, well-evolved relationship now where we have a sort of a mutual dependency. And we have a co-op operated sales network around the major BC population centers with small seafood hubs in the Okanagan, Kamloops, Williams Lake, Vancouver Island, and the Lower Mainland. And we've been doing export sales since 2014, primarily driven by our caviar markets from our origins in the river salmon fisheries. So a bit now about the role of institutional markets. They certainly represent a greater market share with a conscience. It helps an opportunity to have a greater market share with a conscience. It helps small and medium scale fisheries into the value chain by purchasing more of our value added products. Currently, most of the fisheries in Canada are exported. probably 80 to 90% of the seafood production in Canada is exported. And so we're not only exporting our fish at, as they say, pennies on the dollar, but we're exporting our jobs. So what we're trying to do is turn that around by looking at institutional markets. It supports a shift away from these wholesale markets of just that raw product, and it improves local food sovereignty. Growing market share for these local fisheries supports community investment, benefit sharing and stewardship, as I mentioned earlier, and it reduces the carbon footprint on participating fisheries compared to shipping to a whole bunch of smaller markets, restaurants, what have you. The community benefits of institutional markets are significant. Value adding increases the value to the community up to 11-fold the riverbank or dockside prices. The increased value added production builds capacity for community-based fisheries to risk manage more investment in their fisheries and as I mentioned, in other benefits that come out of getting control over their fishery. And these frozen shelf-stable product forms can slow down the fishery and their commercial activities, which is good for the fish, good for the fishers and their communities, in contrast to fresh markets. And don't let restaurants fool you into thinking that fresh fish are the only good fish you can get. With our current technologies, a properly handled fish that's flash frozen soon after harvest is I would argue just as good as a fish that they've dragged in a tote halfway across the country and put up as fresh fish for sale in Portland, for example. And yet those are they're asking extremely high prices for that, very little of which goes to the fishermen. And so the fishermen are always scrambling for those really extra high prices, and it's like heroin. So it drives the prices up. The middlemen are making the money, and it really is hard on the communities that want to fish harder, faster, sooner, quicker. And it's just not healthy. Some of the challenges of the institutional markets, they're often driven by the lowest price point, regardless of often what they say, and as offered by the distributors. They can reduce the conscientious consumers' choices by diluting the brand. So you may buy from Cisco and not really know where your fish came from. And you may find that the fish that you're eating isn't coming from a sustainable fishery, but it was the cheapest they could get. Sometimes that's all that matters for some markets. The lowest price points make it more attractive to import seafood from elsewhere, often undermining food security or supporting cut rate unsustainable fisheries or fishing practices. Large volumes required to sustain institutional markets demand supply chain collaborations, as Darren was mentioning earlier, and that's a good thing. But it's not easy to do. That's the hardest part about being a co-op. And if I'm stubborn, the reason I'm still here after 30 years is, I guess, an attribute to the people that I work for. It's very hard to keep working together with many small groups with their own identities. Institutional markets may need to adapt to a greater variety versus uniformity. And that's something that we're working on. It's all about educating the marketplace and the institutions that want to buy from us. Distributors charge such high handling fees. So I'm not a fan of broadline distributors. Most of the profits in the seafood industry, perhaps elsewhere as well, go to these middlemen. Is that politically correct? Middle persons? Yeah. Our progress with institutional markets, some of the excitement, I guess. We began experimenting with institutional markets back in around 2015. We had a pilot with Canada Corrections, but we were competing with purchasing agreements for best before dated products that were on sale. You know, what can you do? Big brand flow through, like Loblaws, and it's probably the same everywhere. Return really require the use of expensive and redundant corporate traceability software. And I say it's redundant because when you're community branding, locally branding your products, you don't need to spend $100,000 on software for traceability. We had an account with Interior Health has not proceeded much beyond the promotional pilot in 2020. They're really happy with the products. They like the cultural relevance of the products, but it hasn't evolved from our initial pilot. We've just gone through some consultations following the virtual pitch and plate conference, which is part of the Feed BC initiative. Thank you very much. We had a lot of interest and excitement, which led us to building accounts with Cisco and Gordon Food Services. And we'll see how that works out. So we've been practicing sustainability with these fisheries for thousands of years. Institutional markets can help improve fisheries sustainability, food sovereignty, and responsible trade by supporting these community fisheries with experience. Thank you.
Sustainability.
Okay.
How does the co-op ensure safe and sustainable fishing practices? Is there any concern for depleting fish populations for future generations?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. Our origins and our board is cooperatives managed by a board of our fishers, as co-ops do. And the value systems that they bring to our table are significant. They're important for us. They created the co-op to support community-based fisheries, community-operated fisheries, and they strive to ensure that all of those fisheries are sustainable. And the first priority, and this is kind of interesting, as part of our journey, we were involved in negotiations with the federal government to buy out non-sustainable fisheries and to transfer them back to the communities of origin. So these were salmon fisheries initially, and there were fisheries that just were being depleted. So we bought back licenses, broke them into their constituent parts, and back to my origin story with the Secwepemc, we brought those licenses back home. And many of the communities we were working for didn't really even care whether they commercially sold a fish. They were interested in getting the licenses back and providing first and foremost fish to the spawning grounds. Secondly, to ensure that there was fish for the communities for food sovereignty. And some of our communities, even today, they do a fair bit of harvesting for themselves from their commercial fishing licenses, and they're their only client or their primary client. And so that's held true with all of our fisheries. And it's not something that we have to enforce. Because we're working with Indigenous communities, the principles and the values they bring to the table are driven all the way through the supply chain. First thing is conservation. Second thing is food sovereignty and community control over their fisheries. Okay.
Fantastic, folks. Unfortunately, we are running low on time. I would say, I always know it's a good session when you feel they could stop every other planning and just spend the rest of the day with you folks, unpacking what we've come up with here. Advice. I think we've got $1,000 of consulting advice. Really excellent stuff on all your parts. And we could just go ahead from that. So that's a great sign. We do have to watch time going forth though. So I'd like to thank you guys for all of your time on this. And I was taking notes here, not checking text or email. I've got about 20 questions myself. Jessica, there's a really well-dressed man there from another academic institution I think would like to talk to you right there. I'm trying to make some connections. We know that there's folks from Feed BC downstairs. These two gentlemen will be here. I appreciate you all. I'm sorry, he feels like a brother. I appreciate him more. Just the leadership around this, the focus. And what I'm really happy about here is there's so many young people here today and yesterday to learn from the stick-to-itiveness of this guy, that capacity to make the linkages, the relationships. It's half politics sometimes with the relationships, right? So someone who I hope you can be around to mentor and support from, because if we want to get into institutional markets, we need leaders like this guy in the food sector in general to make it happen. So thanks for your time. We'll take a 20-minute break. I know we'll push into the next one and go from there.
Thanks, Paul.